The AFC West, it seems, obviously, you mentioned it, Steve, we have 26 teams that are, roughly 26 teams that are kind of solid in their quarterbacks going forward. The AFC West is a division that's maybe a little bit up in the air. 50% of their quarterbacks maybe are solid through the year. Mahomes, Rivers, respective teams, they're in. How long does Joe Flacco last as the Broncos signal caller, and when and how could Drew Lock maybe push for the playing time? And this is Vic Fangio's first year. Does he unleash the reins, or are we waiting for more of a, we're 2-10 before we let Drew Lock in?
I mean, I think they're going to try to truly. I think they actually do believe that they can rejuvenate Joe Flacco's career. Listening to John Elway speak, I didn't love Drew Lock coming out, but I liked getting him at 40 or so overall, 40-41 when they got him. So, I mean, they're going to try. Joe Flacco in that that system pretty well. That's a system he played pretty well with for Kubiak in 2014. That was the last good year for Flacco. I wouldn't be surprised if we're sitting here 6 weeks into the year saying, hey, look, Flacco looks better than we've seen him in years. Right. I don't think he'll be a top 10 guy, but I think he'll look better than he has.
And I think it's a product, too, of the system. And I also think Flacco, man, he's got a beautiful arm. He throws such a nice ball. He still has that. He went through some injuries the last couple of years, but I think he can get rejuvenated. I know Rich Scangarello. He was a quality control coach when I was with the Raiders. And then he spent a ton of time with Kyle Shanahan and that offense. So he's been in that system, and I think he's going to do a great job. But the biggest addition is Mike Munchak to that offensive line for Denver, because he was the offensive line coach in Pittsburgh with the Steelers. I was there with him. He does a fantastic job. He's a great coach. The guys gravitate toward him. Hall of Fame player, you know what I mean? So he really gets his offensive line playing the right way. So I think the mix with that and Joe Flacco, veteran quarterback, I think that could be okay. And then Vic Fangio, though, what he did in Chicago, and I just feel like what he's bringing there, I'm kind of really anxious to see these Broncos. And I know this division's tough, but I'm also like, because I'm high on the Broncos, but I'm also, then I look at the division, I'm like, shoot, then you got the Chargers and in Kansas City, so where do they fit there? But I still think it could be good for Denver, and I think Joe Flacco's their guy. I don't think there's any kind of question as far as like, do we play Drew Lock? Unless the wheels fall off and it gets kind of crazy.
Right, and that's where they're 2-10 in week 14, 13, and that's where Lock could come in, I think, as well. So they locked up Chris Harris for another year. He's been the highest graded slot cornerback over the last 3 years. All these other slot cornerbacks are getting big deals.
Yeah, what the hell's going on with that? Like, how can he not? He's still on a 1 year, prove it, some bullshit. Like, how can he not get a real deal here?
Because he's in his 30s. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, you can't pay a guy just because he's been good since 2011 or whatever it's been. Yeah. You're paying a guy because of the age.
Jonathan Joseph's still doing it, right?
He is, yes. I mean,
Joe Hayden's still doing it.
Depends team to team.
I think it's less of a
30-year-old corner.
It's less of a prove it deal and more of like you said, he's in his 30s. Can he still put it at a big level? I don't know if it's like they're looking for him to prove it, but maybe just not willing to extend him for as long as maybe he was interested in, because he is older.
We're also talking about Fangio's system and stuff like that, and they've done a good job of making the best of what they had. They haven't always had star corners, even just last year in Chicago, taking Amukamara, taking Fuller, taking Bryce Callahan, who's now in Denver too, and just making those guys good. They're built on, playing a little bit of zone, passing off routes, playing smart, and just making things difficult for the quarterback, not necessarily a star corner. So I think that's probably a part of the reasoning there too.
What does Vic Fangio defense need most? Is it defensive line? That's coming out of Chicago. That's where everyone's brains are going to be, and they're pretty darn good when you look at the Broncos. Vaughn, I mean, they're deep. Petco's still playing there. Shelby Harris still playing well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want guys that can get after the quarterback. You got Bradley Chubb and Von Miller coming off of both edges, but I think it is having that versatility in the back seven, having athletic guys and smart guys, because when you watch the Bears defense, you just didn't see them make a ton of mistakes. They just made a QB's life difficult because the quarterback wants to throw there. Well, that's taken. Well, that's taken. Well, that's taken. And you have that good pass rush, so they play really good team defense in that sense.
So we know the system well here collectively. How big in that offense is the tight end, and what are we expecting the tight ends to do? Because I think that's one of the biggest questions, I think, heading into Broncos camp is who's who of their Big Ten tight ends. They have Jeff Hireman, Jake Butt coming off injury as well, Noah Fant they get high, and then Troy Fumagalli. Literally, it's a who's who of Big Ten tight ends over the past 4 or 5 years. What is the tight end's role in that offense? And who do we think has the advantage? Obviously, it's Fant with how high they drafted him.
your boy Noah Fant.
Yeah, I mean, I think
they create open throws.
Fant
for tight
fits
ends.
what they do offensively in terms of
Yeah.
what they ask the tight end to do. It's a lot of crossing routes, a lot of seam routes, a lot of stuff that if you're faster than the linebacker who's playing man coverage on you, you're going to beat him, just because of the nature of the route you're running. And so Noah Fant's going to be faster than 95 to 99% of the linebackers he's facing in the NFL. That's why they drafted him where they did, and he can inline block as well. Maybe not right off the bat. He's a willing blocker. He might not be, just because that sort of transition is difficult for everybody. But I think he fits. Like, I didn't love him in the first round, but for what they do offensively, he's probably going to be worth a first round pick for them if they utilize him. And Flacco loves some tight ends, obviously.
Worth the first round pick. No matter how well he plays, he's probably, unfortunately, still second best tight end in that division, which leads perfectly to the Chiefs. Travis Kelce.
Oh, I thought we were talking Chargers there.
Oh no, Hunter Henry back from health. Yes, that's why Fant at the most could be maybe number 2 here with the Kelce progression here. We know what that Chiefs offense is after the first year of Mahomes as the full-time starter. Mahomes obviously well documented what he was able to do. We liked him, maybe not as much coming out. That was documented. Thank you, Mike. And when Tyreek Hill, if obviously that's been the biggest developing storyline for them, if he does play, he's the league's best deep threat, especially with Mahomes throwing him the ball. But aside from that, their biggest question mark is running back. They lose Kareem Hunt. And so are they going in to the year with the Damian Williams show? And I know the collective PFF mantra is running backs are replaceable, but how replaceable are we talking about? We get a guy like Damian Williams. They have Carlos Hyde, who's been rejected from a few teams now at this point, a guy that Austin liked, and Darwin Thompson also in there. The running back is the biggest question that I think people want to answer at training camp.
Has there ever been like an Andy Reid offense that didn't have a productive running back though?
Well, I was going to say that.
It's
Andy
like-
Reid, I mean, he's a mastermind.
It just happened. Yeah,
the
it's
mad
just gonna happen.
scientist.
Yeah.
He's going to get the best out of this group, and I think
Screen
Damian
game's
Williams.
So good. Sorry.
Yeah.
Damian Williams played well down the stretch of last year, and I think you could continue to see that, especially in Andy Reid's offense, and then Darwin Thompson too. I don't know how much you're getting out of Carlos Hyde, but it's a veteran with plus play as a backup. Darwin Thompson, more of the change of pace guy. Put him in Andy Reid's scheme. I think it's question mark in terms of who's going to get the most touches, maybe, but I think overall the backfield's going to produce pretty well.
Yeah, the offense didn't miss a beat even without Kareem Hunt. And Kareem Hunt is a fantastic receiver, and he can, create mismatches. And I guess they did different things with Kareem Hunt than Damian Williams. There was plenty of plays you saw against New England quite a bit. They'd isolate him on linebackers, run more wide receiver type of routes. You didn't see that as much with Damian Williams, but it's not like Mahomes wasn't still finding passing yards and touchdowns and still creating big offense.
Yeah.
So there's still, as long as Tyreek Hill's on the field, I don't think you worry about the Kansas City offense. If Tyreek's off the field, that is a big factor. As great as Mahomes is, as great as Travis Kelce is, there is, Randy Moss got to play with Dante Culpepper and Randall Cunningham. It's like if those are like perfect quarterbacks for him. Mahomes and Tyreek Hill are a perfect
Do you
combination.
think McCole Hardman, though, can fill that void?
I don't think right away.
Who is McCole Hardman, our draft expert?
He is limited at this point in terms of downfield. He just was a gadget player for that Georgia offense. Had a handful of nice routes down the field, but I mean, even Tyreek Hill in year one was not a downfield. He was a gimmick player for that offense. Just a tough transition. Incredibly fast though, Mecole Hardman from that perspective. He's going to challenge you, whatever that whole matchup perspective. When he is on the field, you're going to have to account for him. You can't have a slow. You're going to have to account for that speed, but he's not going to be able to come close to replacing what Tyreek Hill did from a receiver perspective.
There's a lot of sub 4-3, not a lot.
Yeah.
There's enough 4-3 guys and sub 4-3 guys that we've seen in the NFL not make the same impact that Tyreek Hill has. He has enough nunuanced route running and other parts of his game.
40 yards of gold. We saw guys that are still looking for roster
He's also like
spots.
a freakish jumper, athletic. His wing, not his wingspan, but his catch radius is so much bigger than maybe his size suggests because he can jump and all that stuff.
And I look at too, like Patrick Mahomes is unbelievable, but sometimes those games, like when they beat the Ravens and on that fourth down play, he's sprinting hard to his right and he fires it across field to Tyreek Hill. I mean, how many plays of those are you going to repeat and do again? I mean, I know he's going to bring his splash plays, but that's a little my concern too. If this offense ever sputters a little bit, then what happens defensively now with them? Are they going to be better than last year? And so that's kind of, I think the Kansas City Chiefs to me are kind of like the wild card. Like, I know with Patrick Mahomes, I mean, I'm all in on him. I think he's one of the best young quarterbacks. But I also kind of, have some concerns too as far as defensively and if he can duplicate some of those big-time plays he made last year.
I mean, we can all be all in on Mahomes and still expect him to regress by about 20 passing touchdowns and only throw 30, which is still a good season. And if that happens, you might lose 3 or 4 wins. So that's the part about the Chiefs. It's going to be really difficult to project the same level of explosive offense year over year, and then the pressure falls on the defense.
Because it goes back to where do you see them getting better from last year? Like O-line, they lost Mitch Morse. Running back, you lost Kareem Hunt. Now they lost him at the end of last year, but no more Kareem Hunt. Defensively, you lost
receiver Tyreek Hill.
Receiver Tyreek Hill if he's gone.
Yeah.
I mean,
at least for some period of time.
And even just health at the receiving core as well with Travis Kelce, like Sammy Watkins being healthy. And then defensively, you lose 2 pass rushers, Houston Ford. Obviously, get Frank Clark, but that's 2 versus 1. And then secondary, you lost your best corner and you had a bad cornerback group to begin with.
So you lose Nelson, that's underappreciated. I think he was the most targeted cornerback last year. So that's 123 passes thrown at one of your defenders that now have to go to your other defenders that did not play nearly as well as Nelson did for the amount of the volume he saw. It's a big factor for them. So they have AAF legend Keith Reeser coming in, maybe from the Orlando Apollos. We'll see what happens there. But
AAF.
Rest in peace.
I think the Chiefs, they went from one of the most man-heavy defenses with one of the worst cornerback groups to Steve Spagnuolo, who's a little bit more game plan oriented. He's going to play a little bit more zone. He's going to play to his guys' strengths a little bit. So I do think you get some defensive coordinators who, even though we always say coverage is king, there's some defensive coordinators who can hide things just a little bit better. Spagnuolo is one of those guys. So I think that's where they're banking on improvement. But I think there's some boom or bust to it because he's going to do the whole, like, hey, we're going to try to force turnovers, and that's, you can't all, I mean, if you knew you could force turnovers, every single coach would do it. So if you run into the year where you could force turnovers, then it's a good year for the Chiefs defense. If you don't, they could get torched again.
And I really like the Juan Thornhill addition. Versatile and him in the secondary. I think he could be a legitimate piece for that secondary that is looking for guys that can force turnovers. I think Juan Thornhill comes in and contributes early.
Well, Tyrann Mathieu compared to Eric Berry. Is that improvement or is that regression?
It's different style. I mean, you're talking.
Berry played 100 snaps though last year.
Yeah,
and was hurt. So
Berry wasn't the same. Wasn't the same player. Berry's more of a guy that you can go line up on a tight end, go cover Noah Fant, go cover Hunter Henry. Whereas Matthew's going to play. I think he's a good fit in this zone scheme. They like to blitz off the slot, so I think they'll get the most out of his skill set. But they're different.
Got it.
So skill sets and differences in the secondary. You can't talk about the AFC West and not talk about the league's best secondary at the Chargers. With how good they are at the cornerback position, 3 of them that are viable cornerback number 1s, and then you have Derwin James and Nasir Adderley. It is the best secondary in all of football? That's not a horrible assumption to make, right?
Yeah, that's debatable. I think they're right up there. You don't know what Nasir Adderley will be year 1, but yeah, I'd put them.
They're up there,
right,
sure.
In that conversation. I think Baltimore very close, Jacksonville, just because Jacksonville's corners are absurd.
I think having Desmond King, highest grade slot cornerback, and over the past 2 years is an immediate upgrade over more than half the teams in the NFL. Still searching for that 5th defensive back that can play slot corner at a high level consistently. And having Desmond King like that, I think, immediately gives them an edge over most of the NFL. And then you factor in Casey Hayward, Derwin James can do everything. I think it's easy to start to think about them as one of the better secondaries.
And I love Gus Bradley. I think Gus Bradley's a great coach. I think he's able to communicate with his players well. The players, back and forth. So I'm just a fan of his and the Chargers, man. I just would love to see Phillip Rivers, get to the promised land.
Finally get one. He does have question marks, I think, around him on the offensive line as well. The Chargers seemingly always have question marks on the offensive line. If they could just stay healthy for a full season and even get through training camp without an injury to the offensive line would be a win this year.
We need Forrest Lamp to play football. Is what we need.
Steve loves Lamp.
We all know how good of a guy Phillip Rivers is, and how he's been a great player for this many years. But how many passes can you give him in terms of Super Bowl? Any other of those top tier quarterbacks, when it comes to making Super Bowl runs, either do or you're not in that league. But for some reason, he seems to stick in that league without those runs. Yeah. Why?
He's just really good. Mm-hmm. I mean, he can make plays under pressure.
Is he less good in the playoffs then, or they've just lost to better teams in those playoff runs?
Combination of both.
Yeah.
I mean, they went through a stretch in their career where the team wasn't really good, I mean, again, throw for throw during their career, Phillip Rivers I think has been right there with Big Ben, probably a step behind, but he's been better than Eli Manning. I mean, Eli Manning is living off of 2 Super Bowl runs, which he was good during both of them, but the defense was also great. It's just tough to define a guy's career by 7 or 8 games, and that's what people are doing with Eli Manning, and those are the 7 or 8 games that Phillip Rivers doesn't necessarily have. But he's been incredibly consistent. He's accurate, tough, durable. He's got everything you're looking for. Just hasn't had that. I mean, Flacco had 4 games of magic. That's carried his career.
True.
Rivers just hasn't had 4 games of magic.
And then I feel like all the other quarterbacks have been associated one head coach or one offensive mind. Rivers has kind of done it throughout the litany of OCs. Yeah.
But he was still fantastic last year. You know, he's still, he throws with great anticipation. He's got a pretty good group of playmakers. But when you watch that offensive line over the last couple of years, even though it's gotten slightly better at points, it just feels like it's, you talk about the college pocket, it's like one guy comes in. Rivers has the walls caving in on him from all angles, it seems, at all times.
And he flicks it. I don't even know how he gets it out.
He's got those beautiful mechanics to get which don't matter because he gets the ball there accurately and on time.
It's unbelievable. It looks like he struggles to throw the ball downfield, but it comes out nice and accurate every time. And I think the biggest thing is when you look at all these quarterbacks, is how can you be consistent year after year, and for the length of time that Phillip Rivers has, Big Ben. I mean, to play, consistently good every year is tough. Let alone week in and week out in an NFL season. So I think that's why Phillip Rivers is a stud.
He has a couple games per season where it's like, all right, now he's done. I mean, because he'll throw the ball. He's trying to throw the ball 50 yards and it's 38 yards short. I mean, he has a few games during the year, and last year it just happened to be down the stretch. Against Baltimore, a couple of throws against New England in the playoffs where it's like, okay, what are you doing? Are you losing your arm? But it's just there's small snippets of the season, but overall he's pretty consistent.
He does lose a pass catcher in Tyrell Williams, and he's got to rely heavily on Keenan Allen and Mike Williams there in that offense as his 2 wideouts. So Williams goes to the Raiders, and I have to start with Austin there and your Derek Carr take recently, but Derek Carr now has officially some weapons to work with. They've gotten rid of Crabtree, who obviously has the drops issue. Cooper's gone. He didn't necessarily want to be there through week 7, and that's why he is gone. But Derek Carr this year in the Raiders, your take?
Yeah, well, Mike and I went on video recently talking about it, and it's a make or break year for him. And similar to the Titans situation, they've made it that way. You bring in Antonio Brown, Tyrell Williams. You invest in the offensive line, the highest paid offensive lineman in Trent Brown. You invested a first-round pick a year ago in Colt Mellor. You are giving him every opportunity. Josh Jacobs, a first-round running back. You're going to put that pedigree on him. They're giving him all the surrounding cast needed to show us that you're above that 18-16 mark. And you look at Derek Carr throughout his career, everyone wants to bring up that 2016 season where if he didn't break his leg, Raiders going to the Super Bowl, man. Maybe not. You look at clean pocket play, he's never broken from a passing grade and passer rating standpoint that 15th rank. Even in 2016, clean pocket passing grade and clean pocket passer rating didn't break 15th. And every other year, it's between 15, 20, 19. Under pressure, in 2016, one of the most volatile stats, we see him up there in the top 5. Every other year, outside the top 30. If you can't perform in a clean pocket with stability across year over year, you're never going to be, in that elite tandem of QBs. And even if he is good under pressure on one season, it's not going to do it. Case Keenum was good under pressure for one season. You saw that with Minnesota. Derek Carr is in that same boat, in that Case Keenum realm, until he does the impossible from a PFF standpoint, because we see how stable clean pocket passing is, and get above 15 and go into 10. You're really going to have to move on from him. You can't afford to keep him under contract and try and rebuild this team for Vegas with Derek Carr under center if he can't break that 15th rank in clean pocket play.
And did Gruden ever really believe in him? What's it like when John Gruden doesn't really believe in
anybody? That's what I was going to say.
Anybody.
He likes to date us, but he won't marry you. So that's what's interesting to see. I mean, look, I think with the weapons you mentioned, with Antonio Brown, Tyrell Williams, I want to see how this works with Derek Carr and Antonio Brown, because, Ben was so good on reacting off Antonio Brown, maybe going a step too deep or putting a little extra on a route, and he'd still complete the pass. If it was me, I'd probably throw an incompletion because I'm throwing timing and rhythm and I'm letting the ball go, especially, too, about double coverage. AB gets double covered. Ben knew when to still take that chance and be aggressive with it. Will Derek Carr be able to do that? Or will Derek Carr see double coverage and say, you know what, that's not my read. I have to go to my read on this side, boom, boom, boom. So how does AB get the same production he had in Pittsburgh? I think they have the weapons. I'm just excited to watch Hard Knocks. I don't know about you guys. But, I would stay up, hours, super late at night trying to just memorize Gruden's playbook with Indy right 10X short, fake 96 power king, naked left X slide. So I didn't want to get in the huddle and mess those words up. But I just think, Derek Carr's second year in the system. He's going to be more comfortable. I don't think he did all that bad last year, but it's a good point you're making about being from a clean pocket and taking that next step. Where are these Raiders going to be? But I like the moves they made defensively as well. Bringing Burfict over. I think he has, a good relationship with Paul Gunther that was with him in Cincinnati, because that Raiders defense needed a different mentality this year. And whether, Burfict's, personal conduct and his foul, penalties, all that, I just think they need a different mindset, and I think that kind of sets a tone defensively for them.
Well, that's good, because they drafted 3 tone setters in the first round. Instead of getting the best players, they got Cleveland Farrell, Jonathan Abram, and Josh Jacobs, a bunch of just safe picks.
So where do you think Mayock's going with that? Is that it? Like the tone setters, like the certain type of guys that fit their locker room?
I'm not going to completely trash it, because I've never been in that position, and clearly he's saying I want leaders, and I want this type of guy, and I want character guys. I just think when you have 3 first-round picks, we went into this draft saying this could be a franchise-defining draft, franchise-changing draft, because you gave up Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper to get to this point. You gave up 2 productive first-round picks, and so you want to replace them with comparable players. And even though I haven't been in that position, I do think it's okay if you miss on some players here and there. It's okay to miss on players. I think that's what teams need to understand. It's okay to miss, but you try to hit the home run. I'm not saying that you take volatile players, but you take the best players. Cleveland Farrell, by most accounts, was a top 20 player at best, top 25, top 30 in our world. So I would never take that guy at number 4. I'm trying to get a top 5 player at number 4. Now, they thought they got a top 5 player, but I think they got a top 5 player because of a lot of the character stuff. He didn't play like a top 5 player on the football field. Jonathan Abram is a box safety in a passing NFL. I'm never taking that guy in the first round. Josh Jacobs is a running back in a world where the running backs are replaceable. I'm never taking that guy in the first round. I'm going for 3 value positions and guys that are going to change my franchise and lead to wins, not lead to culture.
And that's what's so hard, though, the decision to make, because just like we talk about with that character, you want good character guys in the locker room. But then also you need to, talent wins games. You know what I mean? One-on-one matchups win games. Player versus player, that wins games for you. But how do you, there's got to be a little leeway one way or the other. You need those good character guys, but you also need guys that, you know what, we'll deal with it because, man, this dude is impressive.
They also brought in Antonio Brown, Richie Incognito, and Vontaze Burfict this offseason.
That's where you get to the weird stuff.
You look at those additions and you say, I want to bring in high character guys. Maybe don't spend your 3 top 30 picks. They had 4 top 40 picks on high character guys. Spend the free agents bringing in character guys and find the talent in the draft. Instead, they found the low character. Maybe they have talent in Vontaze Burfict and Richie Incognito in free agency. And you have that kind of mixed philosophy in terms of what you're attacking.
Especially young guys coming into a locker room. Like, to speak on that, because now you're going to have young guys who are rookies. They're going to be 21, 22 years old, and they're going to be in there hanging out with Incognito, hanging out with Vontaze Burfict. Like, these are the guys that they're going to naturally look up to.
Right. And I was just going to say that.
It's a really good point.
You talked about Josh McCown earlier, and he's the veteran you want in that locker room. So you're right. These moves the Raiders make, if they're drafting good character guys, well, why didn't they sign good character free agents, veterans that could show the young guys? Maybe it's not a good character young guy you drafted, but you got the good character veteran that's going to lead the way, like a Josh McCown. So that's a great point, because that's what's interesting, and that's why the Raiders are on Hard Knocks.
That is why. The thing about Antonio Brown, some scouts will say, hey, we knew he was a bad character guy back in 2010, Mike. That's why we passed on him way back there. But you don't you take 8 years of Hall of Fame wide receiver
Right.
play for this bad character Antonio Brown.
Right.
I hate even labeling these guys bad characters.
Yeah,
because he did some quirky things over the last year and a half, right? He's still a Hall of Fame caliber player, and even if you've got some quirky stuff that comes out of him, you take that production, because that production is what wins football games. So it feels like they're kind of working against each other with the way they drafted, the way they handled free agency. Half their moves are rebuild for the future, rebuild the culture. Half their moves are Band-Aids and let's win now. And I don't think they all mesh, but either way, it's still going to come down to Derek Carr, who kind of drives you crazy because he's conservative. He's got the lowest average depth of completion last year. He had that interception streak, which was very much luck-driven. He also had, in our system, -2s, the worst throws you could have. He had more than anybody in the NFL last year. So he's naturally conservative, but he also has some of the worst, turnover-worthy plays that you'll see. Yeah. So a lot's going to hinge on him.
It hinges on Derek Carr, but also this Raiders pass rush last year was arguably the worst we've seen in the PFF era. On third downs, worst pass rush win rate. On second downs, first downs, worst pass rush. When they sent 4, the worst we've seen in the PFF era. When they sent 3, the worst. 5, the worst. They could not get pressure on the quarterback. And when you spend a top 5 pick on Clelin Ferrell, a guy that maybe is a top 20, top 30 player, you don't get a ton better. Max Crosby coming out of Eastern Washington, you don't get a ton better. You didn't upgrade one of the worst weaknesses, and maybe you did add to the offensive side of the ball, but two of the most important areas of the game, stopping the pass and passing the ball, they still didn't answer a lot of questions, which is a concern with Derek Carr at the helm, and also not really adding significant star power in the pass rush.
So is it too early to say it's a little bit of 1999 football in 2019? Like, inability to adjust? Is that criticism unfair at this point, given the way that Gruden and Mayock have built this roster?
I don't think it's as much as that. It's like sticking to it's a mixed philosophy of roster development. You say it's Band-Aid.
That's what I've seen,
it's Band-Aid solutions and high character build arounds. It's in both the 2 off seasons. You bring in 1 year older guys like last year. Last off season, everyone's saying John Gruden's bringing in a retirement home. Everyone's over 30 years old. This year he calms down that a little bit, brings in a Richie Incognito, trades some draft capital for Antonio Brown, brings in Vontaze Perfect. You put all these guys in there, and it's that mixed philosophy of personnel that doesn't allow you to rebuild. When you're trying to rebuild and win now, you can't rebuild. And I think that's where the Raiders are.
Trent Brown became the highest paid tackle in NFL history,
right?
And he might not be a top 20 tackle.
Fortunately for those contracts, so Trent Brown, LaMarcus Joyner, Tyrell Williams, and Antonio Brown, they can all be off the books with no dead money in 2 years. I think whoever put those contracts together knows what they're doing and knows that this team is 2 years away. Let's have some fun. Let's see Mr. Big Chest throw some, get some touchdown passes. Trent Brown will be better than Brandon Parker for sure. Last year in Oakland, let's go. Let's have a good time. When we get to Vegas, we'll push these guys off the books and hopefully have a confirmed strategy, a 3-year, 4-year strategy to build this team and actually put some wins on the board.
It just would have been nice if they had better in our world. We'll see what happens. Their first 4 picks in the top 40, if they had picked better players, then they'd be better off.
Drafted players.
That's why it's so exciting to see how this plays out. I mean, because you said it, you had an opportunity to change the franchise. Yeah. Who knows? They still might have.
They still could, of course.
Right.
We're doing this based off our evaluations. Anybody could be right or wrong, but we think that they got
we're never wrong.
Lesser players,
ever.
Lesser players at less valuable positions.
You say it here, and it's those first 3 picks. They had their choice of drafting these franchise-changing players, possibly, but you have the second lowest team coverage grade last year. They don't address that with a guy like DeAndre Baker up there, who the Giants did address. We can honestly look back at this draft class and say the Giants had the 6th lowest coverage grade as a team. They get Baker and Julian Love in the draft, 2 of their first 3 or 4 picks. How much incrementally better that makes them over year 1, 2, and 3. We can look back at this draft class and pinpoint this as the pass rush versus coverage thing. They go Farrell, they don't go cornerback. How much better do they get as a team if their coverage grade increases from this draft class alone? So
yeah, they could have had our best couple corners. They could have had safeties that we thought were better. They could have had 5 edge defenders that we thought were better than Clelin Ferrell. They could have had not a running back in the first round. So that's where we would have gone different.
I think after in the draft grades piece that we wrote after the 3 days of the draft, you saw. A quote in that story is they drafted good players just earlier than we would have drafted them from our evaluations. And you look at Josh Jacobs, our number 1 ranked running back, we wouldn't have drafted him there. Though Jonathan Abram, we ended up putting third round grade. They drafted him a little bit higher. Clelin Ferrell, top 30 player. It's that they reached, and what with Mike Mayock said on high character guys to rebuild this locker room. they're still good players, though, and you can see how it pans out. And again, it's on our evaluation. If they, Tom Cable and the coaching staff, John Gruden coaches these guys up, you start to see maybe plus play from them. But at the same time, earlier than where we would have picked them.
On that note, thank you guys. AFC
Yeah.
Training Camp Roundtable is wrapped up. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, man.
Nice.
Appreciate it.
Good stuff.